Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, from anywhere you are joining us from in the world. You are welcome to this live session put together by Extremely Together of the Kofi Annan Foundation. Extremely Together was created 4 years ago by Mr. Kofi Annan to elevate youth voices in the prevention of violent extremism and to mobilize young people in promoting togetherness through peer-to-peer approach. Today's live session is focused on developing youth-led solutions to polarizations and tensions generated by COVID-19. Joining me to do justice to this topic today is Mr. Mridu. Mr. Mridu is the Asia Coordinator of the United Network of Young Peace Builders, UNOI. He comes with vast experience in youth-led solutions to peace building, especially in the Asia region. Also here is Dr. Erin Satman, who would also join us in doing justice to the topic. Dr. Erin is the policy head working with Facebook on counter-terrorism and dangerous organizations policy for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. She comes with extensive research and analysis on digital activism. My name is Jonah of the Extremely Together from Nigeria, and I'm going to be one of your hosts of this session, along with my colleague Mimoun, also of the Extremely Together from Germany. Over to you, Mimoun.
My name is Mimoun, and I'm very delighted to be here with you today and to have this unique exchange through our virtual channel. Some of you may have joined the last ET discussions, and some of you might be new. So to ensure that everyone is at the same level of information, let me just briefly give you an idea about the background of the ET discussions that we started several weeks ago. So the ET discussions were set up by the Kofi Annan Foundation Extremely Together as a result of the COVID-19 crisis. And we had two objectives in our mind while we developed the format. So one objective was to have an exchange with young people. Our intention was to bring young people together to dialogue with experts, share their voices, and also to pave the path forward in a time of crisis that polarized big parts of PV and CV activity. And the second objective was to make your recommendations heard. So we want to collect your young people's views and recommendations, put them into a policy note at the end of the process after our fourth session, and to present the policy note at the highest level possible to make your voice heard at key international forums such as the United Nations General Assembly. And during our last session, number 3, which is, by the way, available on our Facebook page, and I recommend you to watch it. We discussed the effects of COVID-19 on youth-led activism and the prevention of violent extremism. You may know we discussed that COVID-19 crisis caused a rise in inequalities. And at the same time, we looked at the post-COVID-19 situation from a very positive perspective. And our speakers concluded that there is a possibility for deep long-term transformation in which everyone can contribute, and especially young people who are extraordinarily equipped to bring change. And this brings us to today's session, which is the logical question after all the other sessions. It's about the solutions, and my dear friend Jonah will share with you today's sessions plan.
Okay, so I'm going to give you perspective on the structure of today's live session. This live session will be in 2 parts. First part is a panel discussion about developing youth-led solutions to polarization and tensions generated by COVID-19. And of course, we have our able speakers here, Mr. Ridu and Dr. Erin, who will join us in doing justice to the subject matter. The second part of the live session is a Q&A session where you would have the opportunity to also participate in the discussions by taking the online survey, posting your comments and questions on Facebook chat, Blue Jeans Q&A. Please, while you do this, use the hashtag #ETDiscussions. Hashtag #ETDiscussions, so that it can be easy to trace your comments and questions. Please note that your questions and comments will be addressed in the second part of the live session. Okay, over to you, Mimoun.
Okay, so let's start the panel. We want to be as practical as possible today, and we said our session today is about solutions. We also have the intention to inspire our viewers and to have an exchange on those solutions. So let's start with our first panelist, Mridul. Mridul, can you tell us something about the creative solutions that you came up with on the effects of the pandemic on social cohesion that are being developed by young people in Asia? And what advices can be given to the audience based on your experience?
Sure. Thank you, Mimoun. Hope you can hear me well. I think about the thing that I'm going to share are mostly coming from my experience as the Asia coordinator of UNOI Peace Builders. And just to give you a context, it's a global network having somewhere around 120 youth-led peace-building organizations from 58 countries around the world. And as the Asia coordinator, I'm coordinating with somewhere around 20 youth-led peace-building organizations from 9 countries of Asia Pacific. So the kind of work they are doing, I would just like to share with you. We also need to think from a lens that young people are not able to do a lot of work. There is, of course, some limitations like any other stakeholder has, but still whatever they are able to do, that's very creative, very active, and very important. Especially to address the polarization and division, which is worsened by COVID-19. Youth developed initiatives are actually trying to construct the single identity narrative and exposing oneself to individuals' multiple identities, and also trying to create spaces for more understanding and dialogue. For that, maybe I can just quickly share some of the visuals with you, and everyone can just see if that works. So here, hope you can see this. So this organization called Youth for Peace International, this was the one of the session that they started because of there is a lot of stress, lot of anger, lot of anxiety, sometimes little bit of depression also, and that was a scenario. So people needed some hope. People needed connecting to ourselves. People also needed space to reflect on what they want to do and how they can like engage in meaningful mindfulness practices. And that's why very early when in India, I think the lockdown was started on 23rd of March, and within a week, young people came together and they started doing these mindfulness sessions. Then this is another one. This is kind of a bingo which was created by this organization, and it talks about a lot of elements which are considered as, which can be considered as small act for peace. So this has element of interfaith, intercultural, interreligious element, which was very important to give the perspective to young people that even though you are in a lockdown situation, there is much more that you can do by just doing small act on a daily basis, so that people feel connected and also feel inspired. Then after we organize this Insta takeover, where we try to bring all of these young people, young peace builders from all over the world, and give them our Insta account so that they can share about their days, how they are living this life of quarantine and lockdown, how they are making changes in their schedule, how they are working, what are the ways where other people can connect with them or can learn from them, or the kind of research they are doing. Is it something where people can learn from? So these were those spaces to inspire more young people and give them hope. Then this organization also used constitutional values. They they organize a lot of session on using constitutional values. So, for an example, Indian Constitution talk about like very specific four values, and liberty, equality, and fraternity. These are three of them, which are very much useful when we want to talk about addressing the divide which is increasing between communities. At the same time, there was this gratitude journal which they designed, and they started using it so that everyone can express gratitude. And now, when we are not able to engage with each other, but this gratitude journal help us to share our feelings and not feel overwhelmed by a lot of things happening and a lot of negative things which might be coming out in our mind. Then this organization in Afghanistan is using art these days, and you can see the date is 10th of July, so they are still waiting for a lot of submissions. This organization, Kappa from Philippines, during the Ramadan time, they kind of created this guide which called Ramadan for non-Muslims. These are not rules, but just a guide. And this also talked about like how non-Muslims can do certain things during the Ramadan and how they can treat their Muslim friends. So I'm just sharing one of those pictures from that guide which talks about you can eat with in front of me, and the message clearly says that you can definitely eat in front of me. You don't need to hide. I don't get offended. It can get really sad if you don't talk to me. So go on, eat your food, but please don't bring me to the work lunches. So this is the way they are sharing the message. And another one was, this is from another picture, which says that a little more patience and understanding, please. Please be considerate of your Muslim brothers and sisters, your Muslim colleagues, students, friends may be hungry, dehydrated, or tired. They may say no to some jobs or hangouts. Please don't be mad. So this is creating a space of understanding others and trying to understand the context that they are going through, and kind of bridging the divide that community sometimes has because of misunderstanding or not having understanding. Then this organization in Pakistan, they tried to collaborate with ministry, and then they created these big billboards and streamers, and they put it in 6 major cities in Pakistan. They also used cable, TV, print media, and social media to publish this. And this is in Urdu, but if you read it, it talks about that like corona is not spread by one specific religion. And it also talks about some other things of cohesion and coming together and trying to address this situation by helping each other, but not putting fingers on each other. And you can see these are really big billboards. You can see this billboard is just covering two full you can say buildings. And then this was some of the videos that they created where they brought different religious leaders to talk about like giving public messages for coming together, cooperation, and interreligious harmony during these times. This organization in South Korea, they connected this feeling, which it's a newly acquired feeling that everyone is able to feel how depressing it can be in a feeling of lockdown, or how it can feel like this sense of like one person's individual life, like this right to life. And when you have this right to life, how this is so important that people can go to extreme extent. The economy can be locked down, a lot of things can be just shut down. So this also try to give them a space where they can connect it with feeling of refugees and migrants, and kind of reducing that hate that sometimes refugee and migrant faces, and reducing that divide. So this kind of campaigning they use. Then 16th May was also International Day of Living Together in Peace. So this organization in Afghanistan, they were having a whole campaign around talking about different diversity that they have in the country, and how they can live together during this space, even though when it is Corona time, how they can support each other and be respectful to each other. And this is very specific one. So in Sri Lanka, this organization was talking about during this period how a whole country is actually treating its ethnic and religious minorities. And you see, these two sessions were organized on the same day, but just with a difference of 1 hour. And only difference is the majority and minority perspective. So the same topic was covered completely by majority community panelists and then minority community panelists, just trying to see and give more perspective around it, and then also giving feeling of how both communities feel and how they can be understanding towards each other's causes. So these were some of the ways, very diverse ways, where people actually use a lot of creativity. Young people initiated this, and that's how like the whole things are doing. And there are many more which I can share, but these are the few very creative ones. And yeah, this.
Thank you, Mr. Abridu. Very insightful input from your side. So to Dr. Erin, my question to you is, in their efforts to push, governments to engage in reforms and address the divides, aggravated by COVID-19, what lessons can young PV activists, draw from the success of recent youth-led social movements? What advices can be given to young people to bring about tangible, real-world changes through strategic communications and online social movements?
Thank you. I mean, that's a big question. So I'll try to keep it really concise. But I mean, a really big thanks to the Extremely Together Network and the Kofi Annan Foundation for convening on this topic. I think it might first help to just know the perspective that I can bring to the table just based on my own expertise, recognizing that probably everyone that has dialed in is an expert in their own locale, an expert in their own activism, and in what they're trying to champion. But from my perspective, I work at Facebook specifically on the counterterrorism and dangerous organizations team. So our team develops the policy of, how do we define hate speech? How do we define what terrorism is or what violent extremism is? Recognizing there's a huge diversity of opinions. So hate speech, when you look at slur terms or slang that might be used for racial terms or xenophobic terms, it's really localized. It comes down to language and cultural understanding. So there's these big efforts where on the one hand, for us, it's just a question of how do we make sure we're taking down content that is violating our terms of service, that might actually be harmful or hate speech. That in and of itself is a huge question, and that takes huge amounts of language capacity and different expert teams, but it also takes a lot of communication with expert networks and academics. But I think everyone on this call knows that no matter how much content we remove, the effort to remove content in and of itself is tackling a symptom, not a cause. If the hate speech is coming, it's because it didn't appear out of nowhere, and censorship alone will never be the solution. So what I would love to discuss is some of the best practices and tips for online engagement in your activism, whatever cause you are championing, and really whatever platforms you're using. So most of the tips are not just specific to Facebook or Instagram or WhatsApp. Some real top things, and especially now when we are, depending where you are in the world, but most places restrained from physically engaging on the ground in the same way, we need to use the online space to champion our causes, and everyone else is online right now. So it's a great time to engage new audiences that maybe you wouldn't have been able to reach before. So the first is what works. We know for whether you call it counter narratives or alternative narratives, but any online activist engagement, you really first need to clarify that your message, the messenger, and the platform are aligned. So the questions you have to ask yourself before you decide to put a campaign online are things like, firstly, who are you trying to reach? Who's your target audience? And then think through who's the credible voice to reach that person. And so we know Facebook is not going to be the credible voice to tell you not to be a hater. Governments are usually not the credible voice. Peer-to-peer youth networks are highly credible. I know everyone loves to think that getting a celebrity to say something might be credible, but youth networks and peer-to-peer networks are usually more credible even than if you got a celebrity voice. So tapping into those credible networks is important. And then questioning yourself, what is the format of this messaging and what is the message that will resonate with the people I'm trying to reach? We often start with what we think sounds good, but depending on who you're trying to reach, you might go out of your comfort zone to try to incorporate language and understanding of the people you're trying to reach, whether it's trying to build out like-minded activists to come and protest in the street around something, or whether it's trying to reach target audiences that you think might be at risk of radicalization or might already be using hate speech. And so then thinking through the format of that message is really important. And then where online is your community? So don't use Facebook if the people you're trying to reach are on Instagram or on WhatsApp or even on another platform like YouTube. So don't expect your audience to come to you. Go to where the audience is and engage them on the platforms that they are at. And so we have to humble ourselves to knowing who we're trying to reach a little bit better in order to reach them effectively. And some really basic strategic communication tips on what works, and probably is no surprise to a lot of the digitally fluent people on this call. One is stay visual. So content with an image or a video goes 60 to 80% further than content that is just text-based. And that's probably higher for younger audiences. So think of your own scrolling habits on your phone and think of the type of content that you tend to land on and question why you land on that content. There's a lot of noise out there, and images and videos provide us a cue to stop on particular content. Using memification, so using memes or satire or humor to stop somebody in scrolling and then pivot them to the types of messaging that you want to land can be helpful if a humorous tone or satire fits the message that you're trying to land, although that might not always be the tone. But visual cues and aids to make the person understand why they should stop on that particular content is really important. It's also important that your content is timely. So especially if we're trying to get broader audiences to talk about hate speech or xenophobia, we are all very busy, or we think we're very busy every single day, and forcing a difficult conversation is something we can easily push to tomorrow, every single day. So every single day we can easily say, I don't want to deal with hate speech today. I don't want to think about starving children or suffering in another country or political discontent and civil war. I really just need to do my laundry. So having timely cues of why someone should stop and care about it today or this week or this month is really important. So challenges around why this month is specific, or using certain holidays or news articles that relates to the person and pivots it to your topic is really important to make somebody realize that this is not something they should put off to tomorrow. The other thing that a lot of larger NGOs, even very fancy places, get very wrong is sometimes keeping your message very clear and concise. So if I look at your activist content, I'm going to want to know very quickly, within under 10 seconds of looking at it, what do you actually have a problem with, or what are you trying to change? So is that clear to me what this post is about really quickly? How are you approaching a solution? So you can tell me there's lots of problems in the world, but what are you doing, or why should I pay attention to this content as a pathway to solution? And the last really important one is, if I'm seeing your content, how do I get involved? Or what reaction do you want me to have? So this is where sometimes people put some really interesting content online, and you might get a lot of reach. So a lot of people have seen it, and maybe even a lot of people like it, but it didn't ask you to do anything. So you got a lot of likes on something, but what have we actually changed? And so we have to question, what's the call to action? What would you like people to do? Is it to attend an event? Is it to go and read further information? Is it to take part in a survey? Is it to join you in signing a petition? And the more you can get action, the more you can actually evaluate the impact of the work you're doing online. The other thing is just staying authentic to yourself. And that's why I mentioned that sometimes peer-to-peer networks are more authentic than if you've got a celebrity voice to say something. We see a lot of advertising. You're exposed to a lot of noise online, And we also smell when something feels like it's inauthentic. And so sometimes just using natural voices, natural language, not trying to be hyper concerned about tailoring it. Sometimes the hyper stylized, expensive videos that people have funded to do counter narratives don't go as far as just something easy and quick done on an iPhone. So you don't have to overthink it. It has never been cheaper, easier, or faster to get really lovely, high quality messaging out to the masses. And then the other thing is to be consistent. So again, really practically, if you are putting out one day of 20 pieces of content, but then on your Facebook page or Instagram account, there's nothing for a month, you just lost the interest of your audience. So it's almost better to have consistency of one post every week instead of trying to do everything in one day and then going silent. People actually keep returning to channels or voices where there's consistent content. And sometimes you see a page where it was really active for a month and then nothing for 6 months and then really active for a month. It's better to think of this as a marathon, not a race, if you have a constant activism that you're trying to get out there. And I guess some examples of this is that, especially if you're trying to get more international reach, there's some real basics around defaulting some of your primary messages to English so that it's a catch-all for other parts of the world, and write with really clear messaging. So when I say, me too, that resonates with you, some other messaging about female sexual harassment. And if I say, not in our name, for some of you, that's going to immediately resonate with Muslim communities pushing back and saying that Islamist extremist terrorism does not resonate with them. Or if I say, bring back our girls, that's also a great example of a campaign that took a very localized issue and was able to get top-down responses and international responses around the world. And I will point to that language again as a nexus, because bring back our girls was really important language, because it was not bring back these girls that you've never met from this country you've never been to, from a town you've never heard of. The our made it like we as the world see these people as our community. And so it was inclusive for people outside of the local context to bandwagon on top of it. So language really matters, clarity matters, and yet at the same time online trying to stay very concise is really important. I think some other small things to really hit home is that there's no one way to engage online. So there's no rules really, videos or images or getting people to chat or creating events. And not everything is meant to be sustainable. I know with most all other programs, it's all about sustainability. Your goal might be sustainable, but a given campaign is not always evergreen. And an example of that would be if I say, Je suis Charlie, you know what I'm talking about, but it doesn't mean much to you today as it would have a few years ago. So it's not meant to mean the same thing today as it did a few years ago. Or not everything is meant to be forever if you are bandwagoning in the aftermath of an event, like We Stand with Manchester, which was the movement that took place after the Manchester bombings. And so video, image, memes, online events, amplification of offline events. So the other thing is that an online space is really good to get wider audiences to know about what you're doing in the real world and document that. And I think we've seen that a lot with some of the recent protests, especially around Black Lives Matter, that have been really important, that it is an offline protest march, but the documentation online is really key. And that also brings me to safety, which I do want to land on quickly, because oftentimes activists put themselves out there in a way where they feel really strongly, but they are putting themselves at personal risk for their activism. And some top tips just to run through with. One is that you can, on all the main websites, on all the main social medias, they all have safety pages that you should just check up on. So if you go on facebook.com/safety, it even has things like a privacy checkup, where you can check different aspects of your profile that could be safer or more encrypted if you want. It's up to you how closed or open your accounts are. But things like your personal data, how much personally identifiable information can I find from just a basic open search? You should search yourself and do a phishing exercise and see what you might want to securitize a little bit more. But also if you're working with networks of other vulnerable people, it's really crucial that you are not letting those names and emails or documentation get out to wider audiences unless people agree that that's all right with them. So if you're working with a CSO or NGO, how much can you find out based on their activism with your network? And again, this goes to some specifics about activism in a time of a pandemic. Again, with Black Lives Matter for London, where I'm based, following that page and having participated in some of those protests, even out in the street, those groups on Instagram and on Facebook for Black Lives Matter London openly supported social distancing in offline events, meaning that social media wasn't going to remove their profiles for potentially causing harm under quarantine restrictions. They also openly discussed having people participate wearing face masks, gloves, and having hand sanitizer. So handing out masks and hand sanitizer at the offline events also took place. And in their social media presences, gave awareness of phone numbers to call if you were arrested unduly, and advice on writing down those numbers on your body, just so that if your phone died during the protest, you still had numbers that you could go to. Real practical advice as well about turning off your geolocation, especially if you're protesting where a government might crack down on you based on device usage, and as well as some basic advice on if your activism might get you put into real world harm's way because of where you are, not overly exposing on social media the faces of other protesters unless they give permission, or blurring faces, or making sure you're not inadvertently giving away identities of people. So I think I'll probably keep it there, but there's some open access resources that might be helpful. There's a counter speech Facebook page that just talks about tips around activism and resources on some of what the research says about the tips that I gave. But also there's a social good page that talks about how, as a CSO or NGO, you can optimize some of these tools, as well as where the safety check is. And so I might share some of those links with the Extremely Together team so that they can send them around afterwards if that's of interest to anyone.
Thank you, Irene. That was very insightful. I tried to take some notes, but I think I have to rewatch it again to take all the very important tips. And we already received some questions, and we will come back to them later. And also, everyone, I want to remind everyone that everyone is invited to submit questions through Facebook and Blue Jeans. And before we go to the Q&A session, I would like to ask my colleague Jonah. Jonah, what is your experience in Nigeria? How are young people responding to the current rise in polarization and tensions generated by COVID-19?
Yeah, so just to provide a bit of perspective on the kind of tensions and polarization generated by the pandemic in Nigeria, a point to note is that crime rate jumped suddenly, and of course, people started using social media to report attacks in their communities. So the pandemic kind of created gaps, between young people's economic activities and their economic survival in the absence of widespread, government palliatives. So, however, what we have seen in the wake of the pandemic is that it generated some sort of community interconnectedness and interdependency among young people. So young people started seeing the need to be more connected to one another, to form some sort of security shield against being overwhelmed, by the spread of the virus, the lockdown, and obvious economic impact. So young people have been springing up solutions to foster the resilience of people against the tensions generated by the pandemic. I'll give you a typical example. So young people came together in the coastal region of Lagos in Nigeria and created what they called Food Bank. They mobilized support from individuals and corporations to resource this food bank. This was aimed at actually feeding vulnerable people on a daily basis who could be at the mercy of hunger during the lockdown and could possibly take to extreme alternatives. So they did this successfully on a daily basis until the lockdown was relaxed. Another example of how young people are responding to the tensions generated by the pandemic is basically leveraging digital mobilization to generate support for community interventions. such as community education and enlightenment on the prevention of the spread of the virus, giving out medical face masks and hand gloves, food items. So for instance, people used WhatsApp groups to generate online support and then moved the funds offline to support targeted communities. Specifically, the one I was part of, the community intervention was done in collaboration with the local government of that area. So this example is particularly inspiring in the sense that the financial execution was made very transparent, with all expenses fully accounted for and verified. So as I speak to you, because of the positive vibes generated by this community intervention, another round of digital mobilization is ongoing. So young people also used Twitter and Facebook to really push public education and enlightenment on the spread of the virus, and of course the importance of community relationship and support, which complemented the work being done by the National Control of Infectious Diseases of Nigeria. So this actually led to massive support pool in terms of human and material resources, and this support pool was moved offline for targeted community interventions. And of course, another example is how young people are leveraging the widespread perception that COVID-19 is reinforcing community support system, and that is the only way to survive psychologically. And so let me give you an example of this. Some young people who are based in the UK and in the US, but originally, are from the same area in Nigeria called Makoko in Lagos. So they came together to create a fund that they called Economic Support Fund for Makoko. So Makoko is like a suburban area in Lagos State. So what they aimed at, doing was to raise funds, for other young people who are based in that community. So they reached out to sons and daughters of Makoko community, so who are highly placed in different parts of the world, especially in the UK and in the US. They were able to raise substantial amount of money, and they went to collaborate with local organizations in the community to develop a register, of young people who lost their livelihood, because of the pandemic, and of course could easily look into extreme alternatives. So they placed these people on weekly wages, and they did this consistently for 3 months. So to make sure that these people earn these wages, they kind of trained them as public educators in the community, and to spread, of course, the intent of the training was for them to be ambassadors and spread the word on the prevention of the spread and of the virus, and of course the dangers in taking to crimes. So basically these are the few examples I want to share from Nigeria. So Mimoun, in your experience in Germany, what you have seen, is it similar to what I just described about Nigeria?
Yeah, so in the German context, we have during COVID-19 and also after the government started easing the restrictions. We had, in comparison to many parts of the world, a very soft lockdown. But at the beginning of COVID-19, people were trying, especially extremist groups and people who groups that provide and share conspiracy theories in the digital space. They started spreading their messages, as they do always when there are crises, and also before crisis and after crisis, they share their narratives. But the interesting thing that happened in my view this time was that people starting reacting for the first time. So I can give you an example. There was a young man who shared a video, and this video had a conspiracy theory saying that the German government is trying to change the currency from euro to the all German currency, the Deutsche Mark. And they were spreading it everywhere. They were saying that everything will change and the economic system will change. And I saw it on his WhatsApp story. So I wrote to him. I said, "From where did you get the information?" And he said, look, this is the link. And I looked at the link and I saw that this was a video. It was fictional, and it was just a part of the video. So if you see the real video, you see that they say we are going to develop a conspiracy theory, and we are going to see how people react to it. So I sent him the whole video, and the reaction that I received was that he said, oh, you're right. And the first thing that he did is to write again on his WhatsApp status, WhatsApp story, and to put the other video and to say, sorry guys, I did a mistake. This is a wrong video. And this is just one case. I saw so many cases where people were putting also on Facebook and also on Instagram. You know, on Instagram, there are some channels where people where young people organize digital space where they can express themselves. And also I saw it on Facebook Live that people were opening up the space for young people to discuss those theories, to discuss those xenophobic narratives, and they were reflecting on them. So for me, it was when I saw this kind of development, I was saying to myself, like, our immune system as society starts to work. So it's not like before. Before there were fake news that were shared, misinformation, disinformation campaigns and other things. And people were listening and watching and everyone was following. But right now people are reacting. People are also building the counter narrative. They are establishing their own, as Dr. Irene mentioned, their own credible networks where they provide each other with information. So I think, and before we had the situation that extremist groups were organizing themselves in the digital sphere and developing narratives and so on. But nowadays we have the situation that people who oppose extremism, who work on preventing extremism, and I'm not talking about the professional ones. I'm talking about ordinary citizens who are fed up with the situation that people just share information on others and extremist narratives, and they start to reorganize themselves. And this is a very positive development that I saw in the German context, arising also from COVID-19, because in that crisis, or also the situation right now, it's very crucial when we receive information. It can affect even our lives in many countries. And when I saw this, I said, oh, this is something very positive, especially for young people for the future. And this is something we have to build on. Maybe this is also, and that was one thought of one of my friends. He said, maybe this is a result of the work that all the people were doing before COVID-19, when it was related to extremism, related to conspiracy theories. If this is the result, we have to build on that. And this is something which gives us hope, related to like polarization in the internet and tensions generated by people and in the digital world. And I think what we need is to build on that and to learn from it and to derive lessons, to also to be prepared for other situations that will come in which we need our immune system to react in a right way, in a strong way. So just an idea from German context, a German perspective.
Okay, thank you, Mimoun, for sharing your experience from Germany, and of course, thanks to our speakers, Mr. Ridu, UNOY Asia, and Dr. Erin from Facebook, for sharing with us inspiring perspective from your, words of experience. So we will now go into the Q&A session. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the live session, this second part is an opportunity, of course, for you viewers to also participate by posting your comments, your questions, via the online survey, on Facebook chat, BlueJean Q&A, and of course, use the hashtag #EatDiscussions so that we can trace your questions accordingly. So my first question goes to Mr. Ridu. this is not like an intergenerational question. So, and then of course after this we pick questions from our viewers and participants. So we've been talking about youth-led initiatives, during the panel. So what about the other age groups? We know that for change to happen, we need a wide range of people to join forces. Is there a role for older people in youth-led solutions, and how can youth ideas lead to intergenerational processes of change?
Sure. So, yeah, definitely. See, in most of these cases, youth are the first responder. They are quick to adapt. So often, young people are able to operate in spaces where governments or international community sometimes cannot. So youth have this specific comparative advantage to contribute to this space, and that's why youth are a vital partner. But it doesn't mean that youth has any specific superpower that only they can solve everything and they need to solve everything. It is a collective effort. There are a lot of things which everyone gets from an intergenerational space. There is a huge knowledge that we can get from intergenerational spaces, a lot of credibility that we can get, a lot of support that we can get from these intergenerational spaces. So I think every stakeholder, like every non-youth stakeholder, can see young people as an important ally, important partner in the work that they are doing in order to mitigate some of the effects of COVID-19, and try to bring their own knowledge, resources, and other support and credibility so that these initiatives can get support. Important is to see that youth and youth initiatives are very diverse. So they need to be having that flexibility. The intergenerational spaces should not become very rigid for young people to operate, and also should not see young people from one single lens of that young people are trying to or very good in only social entrepreneurship, or they are only creative or innovative. Young people have a social political agency also, so that agency need to be accepted, and that agency need to be protected. Young people can do much more than just creating campaigns. So intergenerational spaces need to be mindful, and of course there is a space where both and like all of these stakeholders and intergenerational spaces can come together and do a lot of.
Thank you. My next question is to Dr. Reen. So you gave us so many tips, and one question was, what would your advice be to us and all young people, and also our viewers in the audience, on how to best share our concerns and solutions with decision makers? Do you have any ideas of best practices in that field? Because young people want to be heard, they want to reach the highest level, and some of them put a lot of effort and they never reach this level and with their concerns. So what would be your advice?
Again, that's a really big question. I think that now is a really important time, and I think youth voices have been able to channel upwards in things that have an online-offline interplay. So I think we have seen a proliferation of things like online petitions and signatures, whereby certain countries, and again, this is very country specific, because I understand that not every country or local authorities work in the same way, but there are certain laws in different places that say if you get X number of signatures, it has to be heard by a local council, or it has to then be forwarded on to this administrator, and it's never been easier to get a large number of signatures if things are formatted the right way. I think the tip I would give about having your voice trickle upwards is pretty much the same as some of the tips I would give for having your voice trickle horizontally, which is that none of us like to hear we're wrong, and two, none of us like to be scolded. And that seems very basic to say out loud, but the same goes for our peers as for our politicians. And depending on if you're calling truth to power and wanting to call out what might be even atrocities, that's not always going to find an equal playing field with the person that is carrying out those atrocities. So one goal might just be better awareness, and awareness might not happen through going directly to that more powerful position. It might be through media and mainstream media and journalists and online forums that have larger followers and have that trickle up. There's also the point that if you do want to have more of a conciliatory tone and have your topic be taken seriously from the top down, you find a point of common ground. You know the policies that you're trying to change. And what I would say is it's very easy to complain about what is wrong. And believe me, in today's world, it's very easy because there's a lot that we could point to that we can say is very obviously and overtly and visibly wrong. If you want to be taken seriously to make change, it does take the legwork of starting, not having a full picture, but starting to think through how you would get to that change. So to tell a politician or an infrastructure that it's wrong, unless we're pure anarchists and you just want it to be torn down, we need to start thinking through how do you either infrastructurally change it from within, or if some things do need to be torn down, what would you advise is put in its replacement? And those are really big philosophical and existential questions, and again, very locally contextualized. And it goes to, as well, who might be credible. And I know somebody in the chat thread, somebody named Dina, asked about credibility as well from maybe more religious authorities, for example. I know in Egypt there's bodies like Al-Azhar and others that might be credible to some people. So partnering with other institutes that have certain credibilities or positive ties and links to the change makers can be useful. That again takes you as an individual, as an activist or an NGO, questioning authority, questioning credibility, and questioning that space. There is no one voice that is credible to everyone. Full stop. So we shouldn't discount a multitude of voices, because you don't know whose voice might resonate to person X that you're trying to reach. You should not rely on just one voice for any of these. So the more you can get different voices saying the same messaging, it has a better chance of going further. Those are just some top line thoughts on that question.
Thank you. And you mentioned during your intervention the credible networks. And this is a question to you and a question to every one of us. What do you think if you would set up such a credible network? What would be your first step? I just want a very concrete, maybe idea for if someone has an idea in this group. What would be your first step?
I can answer that because in my former... Oh, was the question to me? Sorry,
yes.
I heard another voice. Okay. I can answer that because in my former job before Facebook, I did set up networks like this. I worked for the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, and I was a founder of the Youth Civil Activism Network, YouthCan. I would say that, again, just like your content, what's your network meant to do? So is your network going to help people come together to produce online content? Or is your network meant to focus on LGBTQIAP+ rights globally? Or is your network, so you want to find the umbrella that can sit over your network that brings you together. And you and OY will know this. You know, it's not just we're young, it's we're young with a very specific peace building purpose and activist network around it that has societal causes that people can bucket underneath. So defining the umbrella is very important. Defining the name of your network. There's some really bad acronyms out there, and I'm guilty of some of them, I'm sure, but finding a name that is neutral enough to be a catch-all for your topic, but specific enough so that people joining the network knows what it means. That branding is really important as well. And allowing some flexibility for that network to grow and change, recognizing it shouldn't just be one or two voices that dictate what that network looks like in the long run. So allowing flexibility of more horizontal leadership will allow that network to feel fresh and maintain sustainability over the long run.
Okay, so thank you. Just quickly, Mr. Ridu, so as we are running out of time, It's this question from Akwas Sapbong from Ghana. So the question is, how can we leverage on cultural practices to help increase youth activism against fake news, lies, myths, and unhealthy gossips related to COVID-19?
Mridul, I don't know if you want to jump in there as well, because I'm sure you
Yeah,
have some tips too.
yeah, this is from Riju.
Need some time to think about it. Maybe Dr. Areen can go for it if she has some insights. I still need to collect my thoughts on this.
Okay.
Sure.
So yeah, fine. We have a question for okay, so to you, Erin. So how can we use this question? Is here from the same person, Akwasi Sabong from Ghana. So how can we use behavior change communication, messages, materials to promote wearing of face, nose masks among young people in communities?
Yeah, I think we're seeing that a lot. One way is just to diversify what mask wearing looks and feels like and be the counterculture that trends it. So I've seen some amazing fashion designers making it look better to wear a mask. I've seen a lot of proliferation of people just creating that counter trend. That's one thing in and of itself. There's a lot of misinformation around masks, like that it will cause increase in carbon monoxide inhalation and some things. And believe me, there's flat earthers out there too. So you name a conspiracy theory and somehow it will trend somewhere at some point. But I think that there's some debunking to have. And one thing that helps is to have some go-to website links. So when you're seeing misinformation spread online, one thing I've seen activists do is have some go-to links whereby they're not even inserting their voice much because maybe they feel shy or maybe they think they will be counterattacked, but they might share a link to the World Health Organization myth-busting fact site, which they have, by the way. There's a great myth-busting fact site. I know Facebook has an entire COVID-19 misinformation debunking as well in coordination with the World Health Organization. I can share some of those links. So maybe even just inserting those comments as people go, or, you know, we love numbers. We're very BuzzFeedy in today's world. So there's lots of articles of, you know, the top 10 trending masks or the top 5 reasons why wearing a mask will reduce this by X, or the 5 easiest ways to stay healthy while still engaging in the outdoors. So having some go-to links as your commentary is very helpful. And then as activists, there's an amazing group in Cameroon, the local youth corner, by Christian Ashaliki, and they turned a bunch of their youth work into making hand sanitizer, helping distribute it, but also help making short, funny videos just at home, like a short TV series of debunking myths and confronting misinformation and sharing those as trending counter content. And that's been, you know, it didn't cost anything in that case to make that. It was just a way of using humor, innovation, and quick form videos to put more content out there to debunk some of the misinformation about health concerns.
Okay, so I see that Mr. Ribdu, you've answered the question from Zaid on the tension between China-India borders. So I think that's pretty much okay. Or you want to share more perspective on the answers you provided?
No, that's mostly covered already. That was a very specific one. But to address to this question on cultural practices, I don't have a lot of insight on it. But one thing is that when you understand cultural practices, it gives you a lot of insight on how hate news or fake news is created or disseminated and why it is being disseminated, who are playing more roles, what kind of age groups, what kind of people. So that insights you get from the culture practices, and then also what kind of myths you have in the culture. So it helps you to actually see from a different lens and try to find some good solutions from that. That's something which I know, but also culture sometimes might have like different elements. Sometimes some culture has this element of local language-based humor, which can be used, but that need to be there. So that's very contextual to certain cultures, about like about addressing these myths and gossips. But a lot of information around COVID was very much scientific based. So I felt that somehow I didn't see a lot of scope of using cultural based practices, because a misinformation was being created because of this gap between scientific information and then people just guessing about some of the remedies or why it is being spread by one particular religious community and not other. So those kind of things were mostly happening.
Okay. Mimoun, you have a question from your side?
No, but I just wanted to remind ourselves that we are going to share this best practice that you mentioned, Midul, and also the links that Dr. Reen was mentioning, also from her first intervention, and we would like to share it afterwards to our audience and the Extremely Together network. So,
Sure, I actually shared the links in the Q&A chat that's over to the right, but I have some more that I can share as well, and also happy to follow up if there's some questions. I know Bjorn threw a question in about the far-right extremism, and so I don't want to ignore that, but maybe we can take it in a follow-up since I know we're at time.
Okay. Mimoun, you want to share your concluding remarks?
yeah, so I think some questions were very general, and I think they can be a title for our next ET digital discussion. Maybe we can get some inspiration from the questions. So yeah, we are now like in the end of our session. Unfortunately, I feel like the debates and the discussion just started, and but this is part of this kind of virtual exchange. In the real world, we would have stayed maybe 2 hours or 3 hours, and no one can leave. So I want to say thank you for all your insightful interventions. Thank you, Irene. Thank you, Mridul. Thank you also to all our viewers for watching. We want to invite you all to participate in our next session, which will take place on Thursday, July 16th. Same time, same spot, 6 p.m. CET, and the topic will be our demand of our leaders, reforms needed for a post-pandemic future. And one of our distinguished guests for the next session will be Mrs. Jayatma Vikramanayake. Probably you know her. I think everyone knows her. She is the United Nations Secretary General's Envoy on Youth. And yeah, we are looking forward to the discussion and also to keep in touch and in a possible future digital discussion. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
So thank you. So, and to appreciate our participants, viewers, listeners, we want to encourage you to continue to share your questions, ideas, comments, via the online survey. So you would also have the opportunity to provide feedback at the end of this session. So just take the opportunity to do so. So we'll be looking forward to getting more comments from you, more questions, concerns. Of course, trust that we will respond to them accordingly. So of course, those concerns, questions, and ideas you share with us, they will also feed into the policy document that we are working to put together at the end of this series of live sessions that we are doing. So on behalf of Extremely Together, I want to appreciate all our participants, all our viewers and listeners that followed this discussion, right from the first session to now, of course, and to the next one that will happen that Mimoun just talked about. So thank you and have a pleasant day.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.